Right, and welcome everybody. This is a coaching seminar focused on box lacrosse, hosted by Semler. I'm Rob Gooch, Semler President, and today we're working on slide Northern Box Lacrosse, Southern Box Lacrosse, and Team England Box Lacrosse, all coming together to make sure to give you this today. Some housekeeping rules for the next hour. Please go on mute with your camera off when you're just listening. You're welcome to switch on your cameras if you want to ask a question or if you're answering a question. And obviously Tommy, you can see, will have his camera on during his main slot on today's seminar. And this seminar is being recorded. Share it widely around the lacrosse community, and you can always watch it back when we get back to getting on the box lacrosse floor. So the topic of this is box lacrosse, and specifically the terminology of the game, which is different to field in many cases. So it's essential to understand this as a coach, player or official, and Tom will repeat that during his slots. So I'm pleased to welcome Tom. You can see him, Team England box captain. He'll be the main presenter today. Once Tom has finished his presentation, there will be ample time for questions and answers about anything related to box lacrosse. If you want to use the raise hand feature in Teams, I can cue you in to ask your question. I've got someone struggling to get in, so I'm now going to hand over to Tom and message Rob Clark who can't find the Teams link. So, Tom, over to you, and I'll be turning off my camera.
Yep, perfect. So, first of all, let me just check that everybody can see my screen. Yep, you got it?
Perfect. Yep.
All right, so what we're going to run through today is really just the very, very basics. These are the things that we spend a bit of time on at the start of SBL sessions, just getting our heads around, introducing field lacrosse players to some of the stuff that you absolutely have to know before you can start playing in a kind of meaningful way when it comes to box lacrosse. So it might be a bit kind of fundamental for some of you on the call. I know there's quite a bit of experience that's joined, but it never hurts to go over this stuff. And when we get to the discussion, we can start to get into a little bit more detail then, and everybody can kind of chip in. So I'm going to start off just by showing you what the floor layout looks like. This is going to be the basis for all of the slides that I run through. We've got about 8 slides that I'm going to show. Hopefully it's pretty self-explanatory. You can see the penalty box and the bench are on opposite sides of the floor, and those 2 triangles are the goals, obviously surrounded by the crease. So something that we do in box lacrosse from an offensive standpoint is we split the field in half from one backline to the other backline. And the main reason that we do this will hopefully become a bit more obvious in a second, but it's all based on one of the key differences, which is the size of the goalkeeper and the size of the goal. So the way it works is we have all of the right-handers. You can see my attempt at an illustration of a stick there. We have all of the right-handers on the left side of the goal as they look at it. So if you're right-handed, you're looking at the goal, you would be to the left-hand side, and that's so that your stick is to the inside, giving you a better angle to shoot at. So hopefully my diagram makes that clear. I make no apologies for this, actually, because it wasn't that easy to draw people on PowerPoint. And then we have the lefties. The lefties are on the other side of the floor. So that's the first absolutely key difference between box lacrosse and field lacrosse. Obviously, it requires a reasonably even split of left-handed and right-handed players. That's not something that you see a lot in a lot of field lacrosse teams. If your team doesn't have enough left-handers, what you sometimes see is, one probably shooter on the left-hand side who is left-handed, and then another person might go down there with them and just set picks. And we'll talk about the position of the offensive guys in a second. But this is just a really key thing that you absolutely have to get used to when you start playing box lacrosse. In the attacking half especially, the righties should be giving themselves a really good angle by being on the left side of the pitch, and likewise the lefties should be doing the same thing on the opposite side. Okay, so I'm going to talk through some of the names of the different positions. Okay, these are different from field lacrosse, and one of the biggest differences, this first one, is that X in field lacrosse obviously is behind the goal. In box lacrosse, it's that top central point above the goal, and it's a really important position. We use it to swing the ball from the right-handed players to the left-handed players. Obviously that position is really central, so you can have either a right-hander or a left-hander in that X position at any point. Behind the goal, we've got Y, so that kind of makes sense if you're thinking about GCSE maths. You've got your X-axis and your Y-axis, so the opposite of X for us is Y. That's behind the goal. We spend a lot less time there in box lacrosse than you do in field lacrosse, although it can be a useful position to get the goalie moving. Now we've got two creases in box lacrosse, and these creases kind of occupy, about a 4 meter by 4 meter space, I would say, on either side of the goal. If you're the right-hander, you're going to be in that position that we talked about before, giving yourself a better angle. You could be right on the GLE, that would still be a crease position, or you could be further up towards the middle. When we're defending, a lot of what we do is based on really guarding these crease players from getting a pass from the opposite side, because it causes the goalie big problems. So these are our two crease spots, not just one like in field. Okay, now we've got the box-specific spaces. So what we call the half boards, you'll see those right up on the edge of the floor diagram. The half boards is pretty much on that kind of restrainer line. I think it might be called the blue line in box lacrosse, but pretty much that on that restrainer line up against the boards, that's the half board position. And then we've got what I'm calling the shooter spot. That's probably because I'm more defensive minded, but some people would call it T, but I think of it as the shooter spot, and that's because if you imagine a right-hander in that top shooter spot that we can see, that's where they're really going to be threatening to take an outside shot from, particularly in a man-up situation. So we've got T, or the shooter spot, there. And finally, we've got a really important one, which we call the sweet spot. That might be more like what you traditionally think of as a field crease spot, in that it's a little bit higher up. The sweet spot, a lot of the other positions can be static for 2 or 3 seconds. Someone could be sitting in those spots. The sweet spot is really somewhere that you're just moving through. You don't want to be just stood in the sweet spot. So you might, begin on the crease, come into the sweet spot hard, and then out to set a pick on the shooter spot, or out to set a pick on the half boards. The sweet spot is just a point of reference, really, to force the attack to come in before they go out and set a pick, and that will cause the defence quite a lot of problems, because I'll come to it later on, but a lot of the time the defence are going to be in that middle core bit of the field. So if the attack come through the sweet spot and start jamming people up, that causes us defenders problems when it comes to setting up. So last point before I open up for questions on this slide, you'll notice that there's quite a lot more spots than there are players on the floor. So you only have 5 attacking players out at one time. But we've got, how many here? We've got kind of, is it 5 on each side? 10 different spots that we could occupy. So this is one of the best things about box lacrosse, and one of the biggest advantages that you can take into your field lacrosse game, having played some box, is there's 10 spots and only 5 guys. So you've got to occupy multiple spots at different times in an offensive set. and it really forces you to move through the various spots. There's less space, so if you're not moving through those spots, it's going to be really easy for the defenders to contain you. So like I said before, you'll see people, maybe they start up at X, pass the ball down, move into a shooter spot, receive the ball, let that guy from the half boards come into the sweet spot and out to set a pick on the shooter spot, then maybe you swing it back to the other side. So even in what I've just described, which is maybe a 5-second period of play, you've got two people working together who might have occupied 4 different spots, or even more potentially. So that's a really key point on this slide, is we've got 10 spots to occupy, but only 5 people out on the floor, and you've got to move between all of those spots and use them at the right times. Pause there, and if anyone's got any questions on these different positions, kind of chip in and ask them now. I know, Pete's on the line as well. Pete, if you've got anything that you'd add about the positions, feel free to jump in. But yeah, I'll just pause there and let people feedback for a second. Unless there's no questions. No? Okay. All right, I'll move on. We'll stop again at the end for questions if there's something that you that kind of occurs to you. So I've tried to map out here an illustration of what I was talking about with the movement, how important that can be. So here you've got lefty strong setup, and I'll talk about the strong and the weak side in a second, but we've got 3 left-handed players, 2 right-handed players. The lefties are set up pretty tight to the goal. That middle one should be probably a bit further out to be on the half boards, but we've got one guy in the crease, one guy around the shooter spot, and one guy around the half boards. And I just want to demonstrate how useful the sweet spot can be. So if we look at the left-handed player at the bottom who's on the crease, if they come into the sweet spot, and it's mirrored on the opposite side in this slide, he now has a choice of what he can do. So if the ball's on in the stick of the right-handers, then he can set a pick for either of those 2 people. Maybe he lets the shooter cut underneath a pick into the crease spot and get dangerous that way, or set a pick for the half boards and they can cut over the top. It's really up to that person in the sweet spot. They've created that decision for themselves by going into the sweet spot, which is a really useful place to set a pick. Okay, I'm going to switch now to some slides with defenders and attackers in them. The defense are in red, the attack in blue. The triangle is signifying where the ball is in this case. And we're just going to talk through some of the terminology when we're in play that we might use. Okay, so balls up top, as we can see, and here we're just going to illustrate which side is strong side and which side is weak side. Unlike field lacrosse, that doesn't talk about whether you're on your strong hand or your weak hand. That's the number of players who are on either side. So we've got 5 guys out, which is an odd number. So therefore, there's always going to be a strong side with 3 players and a weak side with 2 players. You can even do it as like a 1-4. So your strong side could have 4 players and your weak side could have 1 player. That's something which the Iroquois occasionally do if you watch some of their highlights, but that relies on like really good handling. So typically, most of the time, you're going to see like a 2-3 like this. In this case, we're lefty strong is the terminology that we use, and that's because the left side is the strong side and has more players. So we're lefty strong, righty weak here, and it would be the opposite way around if the ball or if the players were on the other side. Okay, so I'm going to step into some defensive terminology now. So in this example again, the ball's on the right side, on the weak side, the right-handed side, sorry, on the weak side, and we've got 3 defenders marking the left-handers, and they're set up in what we call a wall. And all this means is we're going to try and hold our position. the bottom guy is going to try and stay at the bottom, middle in the middle, top at the top. And as those three left-handers come in and set picks and fight to get into space, those three defenders are in what's called a wall, and they're working as a three, passing people back and forth. They're not going to stay like that for the whole set. If one of the left-handers goes behind goal or goes to a more central position or sets a successful pick or clears all the way through, any of those things could upset us and take us out of our wall into just a normal 2-on-2. But fundamentally, we're setting up in what's called a three-man wall or a wall, and we're passing players back and forth between ourselves. Okay, one more point on the defensive three players in this area. The middle guy, so Rob made it clear that we wanted to explain the badger in this presentation, which he's asked me to do. So the badger is kind of like the crease slide position in field lacrosse. The badger is the middle of the wall, and that's effectively the person who's communicating that they're hot and they're able to help. And the reason that they're able to help is obviously, they've got a teammate below them and they've got a teammate above them, and they're in a really great place to occupy some dangerous space that we want to keep the offensive players out of. So we're always defending the middle of the pitch where people have a better angle on the goalkeeper, right? So that middle player is the badger, and all that means is if the ball carriers perform a successful pick and roll, then that badger, it has one eye on the other side, and if the ball carriers are able to get away from their man with a pick and roll, the badger's going to come across and should be in a really good position to hit that the person rolling out of the pick quite hard and upset the attack. Okay, so that's the badger covered. I'm going to now talk about the last defensive position, which is the anchors. So there's a lot of pressure on these players in the anchors positions. You've got an anchor on both the left and the right side typically, and it's just the lowest person. So I'm going to start with the left-handed attack side, so the off-ball side, the strong side of this slide, which has a guy in this low anchor position. This is a typical anchor position where he's right on the crease, able to see what's going on, doesn't want to move too far away from that space, and wants to communicate to the rest of his side. So he's talking specifically to these two other players. It's almost the quarterback of his little defensive unit, really. So that's a very typical area that you would see an anchor set up right on the goal crease. On the opposite side, this guy has a harder job right now because the ball's being carried up top. His check has gone to the half boards, so he's not in a crease spot or a sweet spot where it would be easy for him to stay as an anchor. So the decision players made and that we should make is to hold the anchor as long as possible to support the ball. Even if his check goes all the way out to the half boards, he'll remain low and communicate with his teammate effectively. And if this ball carrier turns into a dodger, if his check comes in and sets a pick, then he's able to sit nice and low and communicate to the top of the play, stay top side or whatever it might be. So the anchor is a really important position, and it's the bottom of the defensive set, if you like, on both sides. You should hold that position as long as you're the lowest player in the set, basically. So I'm just going to go back one more time, talk through those three defensive terminologies that we've just talked about. So one is a wall. That's the three players passing the attacking checks back and forth between one another. Then you've got your badger. There is only a badger on the strong side. There is only a badger where there's three defenders. At least that's how I've been coached. I might get corrected later on, but that's how we've always played it, is to have a badger in the middle of the strong side in the three, supporting the weak side where there's more space. and effectively playing that field lacrosse crease slide. And then we've got the anchors, who, like we said, are the quarterbacks of their little defensive unit, who are talking to the players around them and dictating play, if you like. They also have some fun jobs in a man down where they have to block shots for the goalie and that kind of thing as well. So the anchor's also a very important position. Okay, so I've gone through that quite quickly, but I can skip back to any other slides or recap on anything if there are any questions. But that's kind of what I had today, just for a quick introduction to the fundamentals. Like I said, this is typically what we spend like the first 30 minutes at every SBL session working on. So these are the things, particularly the field position, the right side, left side, are the fundamentals that you absolutely have to know before you can start to play box lacrosse productively. So I'll open up for any questions now or comments from you guys.
I'll just start here, Tom, as well. Tom, thank you. That was excellent. Leave your presentation up because with the questions, or if you can leave it up, I guess with the questions you might want to go back and refer to a few things on the presentation.
Yep.
So we're going to go through the floor. So first of all, Catherine, have you got your hand up? Have you got a question for Tom, please?
Yeah, hi. It's actually Jules. Sorry, I'm just using my girlfriend's account. I didn't know how to change the name. I got two questions, but first one, if you go back to your slide with the wall, and my main question is with this setup, if we have the strong side half board coming more towards the penalty box, would the wall stay exactly the same? Especially the anchor, would they all kind of shift the assignments one up, if you know what I mean, or would we just like how much we actually defending here a zone and how much we defending the players?
So they're off ball in this situation, right? So if the attacking players come all the way out to the half boards and I'm in that defensive wall, then that's really good as far as I'm concerned, because they're becoming less of a threat, and I would try to hold that wall position as long as possible. If this player pops further out and this player stays where they are, can you guys see my mouse when I move my mouse? Yeah, cool. If this player stays where they are and this one moves further out, then it's up to these two defenders to communicate together. I would expect this bottom defender in the anchor position to take more responsibility for the player that's further in, and the middle player to perhaps think about moving further out. Or remember, this is actually a badger in this situation because the ball's on this side. So if they go out to the half boards, let the anchor take some of this responsibility, and I'd even take a step maybe further away from the man and think more about helping. And that's where you're reliant on the anchor to really communicate with the other guys. You have to help now or whatever.
Would you do the same thing if the guy and attackman on the half board, instead of coming more towards half board, move more towards the halfway line? So, in this graph towards the left, so they're kind of playing even more top position, because that kind of looks then like a mini 3-1 with the anchor being so low by the goal. Would you again kind of have the anchor coming higher and then the badger kind of shifting higher up on the field as well?
The anchor can move up the floor. So if there's no attacking players in any of this quarter of the floor, the anchor player can move up as long as they're marking the lowest player on their side. They can move up. That's not a problem. They'll still have certain responsibilities that come with being the anchor. So if you're the anchor, you're expected to be able to help underneath the top guys. So the further you come up, maybe the harder that job might become. And you're also still responsible for any passes into this area. So you would have to be aware that, if something happens and someone pops up in this area, you need to be able to get down to help. But the anchor could absolutely come up to this restrainer line. It becomes more important to support the top guy if they're overloading here, and the middle, is perhaps not there. So the big thing about the anchor is that you're the lowest defender on your side. you don't have to be right on the crease. You could drift up further.
Awesome, thanks. And with the anchor on the weak side, how much space would give that shooter, that the weak side half-board guy, before really committing?
A lot of the defense that we do is based on it. Well, almost all the defense that we do is based on the goalie, right? Because it's hard to score on a good goalie who is set, and it's easy to score on a good goalie who you get moving. So the lower this angle is, the harder the shot, particularly if my goalkeeper is set in this position. So if they're way out at the half boards, that's not a shot that I would be like massively worried about, to be honest. I'd be probably giving them about that amount of space. And by the way, we're into this kind of thing. This is just how I would play it. It's not necessarily the perfect answer, and there'll be different situations on different teams where maybe this player here is, an all-star shooter, and maybe I would play it slightly differently. But in 99% of the cases, if they're way out on the half boards and my goalkeeper is set, then I'm more interested in being the support underneath the top player. The brief that the top player has here is absolutely can't let the ball carrier topside, which is why this top player is so exaggerated up by the halfway line. So they're trying to funnel this ball carrier down low, right? And my player's out on the half boards. My goalie is set. Okay, so this puts me in a really good position to just kind of occupy this middle dangerous area, and talk to my guy up here who's being dodged on. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, thank you. Perfect.
Tom, a follow-up question on the wall, if I may.
Yep.
So if the ball is on the strong side in this particular picture, so if the ball's with any of those side players, are those three wall defenders, are they almost playing as a zone, therefore, or are they potentially swapping the badger swapping with the top player if their players are moving? Are they zoning or are they man on manning when they're on the ball side?
Yeah, when they're on the ball side, you're definitely going to be a bit more sticky to your man than on the off ball. Definitely more man-to-man than zone. I think one of the things that happens when you start playing box regularly is the lines between whether you're man-to-man or zoned become increasingly blurred, and you start to develop, I guess, principles as to why you would make decisions in a certain moment. So if this player is carrying the ball over the top of the wall here, I'd expect this defender to be doing the same as we were on the other side, take away top side, and then perhaps these two are a little bit more in their own zone, but this player is going to be a bit stickier with the ball carrier. We don't want to force a change just because we're on the strong side and we should be in a wall. If the ball carrier gets to this position and suddenly the on-ball defender just takes the pressure off in order to back off and get into his spot in the wall, then that guy's just going to rip a shot or have his hands free to bang it to the opposite side and causes real problems. So you're not applying like hard and fast, this is a zone, and I should never leave my area. You're reading the situation, talking to the other players in the wall, and really, again, the anchor can do a lot here to help out, with that situation that you're describing, because the anchor can see everything and is occupying that lowest spot.
Wonderful, thank you. I've got another question, but if anyone wants to jump in, just raise your hand, we'll jump in. But another question I've got, Tom, is when you're transitioning into defence and you've maybe got 4 or even 5 new defenders coming on, is there a particular order that you want to set up these 5 positions? So do you set an anchor first, or do you go straight to the ball and the second player maybe goes to an anchor? Do you go strong side anchor or weak side anchor? Is there any rules, or is it free for all?
It's free for all. A couple of things when you're subbing on in transition. So we normally try and have our fastest or faster defenders at the front of the line. So that is a dangerous situation. So the situation that you're describing is when, pardon me, we've just attacked. So we've attacked at this end. We've had 5 out-and-out offensive players who we need to get to the bench to get our 5 defensive players on. So right away in defence, you're almost in before you're on the actual floor. The two fastest defenders are at the edge of the box. They're going to come in first, and then you're going to bring in your other 3 or 4 defenders behind them. You'll have to make a judgment based on who's breaking down the floor. For example, if the other team have a weak ball carrier breaking down the floor, let's say right-handed this side, so on his wrong side, and they have a really great right-handed shooter flying in from the bench, I'd almost say in that situation the guy flying in from the bench is more dangerous, and I'd want one of my first defenders to pick up the person flying in from the bench. In other situations where it's not as easy as that, my attitude, and it might surprise you to learn, I'm very rarely the fastest person coming off the bench, so I don't always have this job to do, but my attitude would be crash the crease just like you would in field lacrosse, play from the inside out, so get home, get onto the crease, identify who the most dangerous players around that area are, and pick them up. A situation you see quite a lot is a dangerous transition player from the other side, so someone who's played defensively but can score goals is coming very fast with the ball. Nobody else is there to support him yet, and that's when your fast defenders are really useful because they're going straight to the ball. But it's really a judgment call. I'd say you're probably going to occupy the anchor spots first just because they're closest to the goal and most dangerous, but you've got to make a decision based on the players that are out there and the positions that they're in.
Thank you. Are those? I think there was a session. An SBL session where the 5 defenders were numbered. Is that something that makes sense?
Yeah, definitely. So when we're on the bench defensively, and the ball's in the attacking half, I would be, if let's say I'm first off the bench, I'd be shouting, I'm one, who's 2, who's 3, and I'd expect us to go down. Certainly every single set where you're in the bench and there's an attack going on, I would expect that 1, 2, 3 to have all called, I'm going 1, I'm going 2, I'm going 3. In most cases, I'd expect 4 and 5 to have said that as well to avoid confusion. But you really have to be on your toes. As soon as the ball's in the attacking half, there's a 30-second shot clock, right? And what I've seen in domestic box lacrosse here is people very rarely use even half of that. So as soon as you're coming up to be the front of the line in the bench, there's a good chance you're on in 15 seconds. So you need to be communicating, I'm 1, I'm 2, I'm 3, I'm 4, I'm 5.
Thank you. Any other questions for Tom?
I got another one if I may.
Go for it.
With box being, tight, less space of a sort of a lacrosse game, and I find it a bit more, from my limited experience, more reactive. So in field it's more, I do my split dodge, I do my dodge, and after that I have way more time to kind of decide if I'm going to shoot, if I'm going to feed into the middle, whatever happens. How do you, condition yourself to have that mentality, or what drills can you do in a team who is just transitioning into box lacrosse to get that mentality to dodge, and after the dodge try to make your decisions a bit faster?
I'm glad you asked that question actually, because I'd forgotten to plug something which I have to plug. So it's a good question. That's something which Walt Christiansen, the coach of the England team, talks about to every single player is right now, or certainly let's say 3 years ago when he first came involved with the England team, he would watch a game and say, you can see the English guys are out there having to think about every decision that they're making because it doesn't come as natural and you don't have as much time as you do in field. So exactly that situation that you're describing, and the only real solution to that is going to be reps. And it doesn't have to be reps in in a box like the one that we've drawn up on here. It's reps in these positions, with these rules and with these goalies in these positions. It's getting reps out in that so that you're more comfortable, defensively and all the stuff that I've described, and I'm kind of aware that it's been very defensive focused, but it's kind of no surprise because it's me. And attacking wise, like the standard thing you just described from a field perspective is, or the way that we played kind of 5 years ago, is an alley dodge. Have a look in the crease where the slide's coming from. Have a look on the backside. Is it on? Can I shoot? Blah, blah, blah. If the answer's no, I know I'm going to give it behind goal and swing it. That's drilled into everybody, right? In attacking box, there needs to be a different thing drilled in, which is, okay, my pick's coming. I'm going to read my pick. What position have they gone into? Have they successfully rolled away? Okay, no, they've not rolled away. Is there a guy on the opposite side, on the opposite crease that I can just bang a quick pass to? No, he's not there. Okay, my next look is to look up to X and swing it to the other side. All of that comes from just reps and reps and reps and reps. And something which is coming up, which is going to be really good, which I should have mentioned at the top of this, is SBL are actually going to run a series of box lacrosse sessions on five-a-side football pitches where we'll bring box lacrosse. I say we, I can't take credit for this. Sam Perry, Rob Clark, Luke Wiley are going to bring box lacrosse to the different kind of hubs of lacrosse in Semler. So that I think there's going to be one in Bristol. There's going to be one around Hitch and Milton Keynes area. I'm going to be involved in one in London. I think they're talking about doing one in Surrey, Sussex area as well. And we're going to just rep these different drills. Even though it'll be on a five-a-side football pitch, you'll have a box goalie. We'll get all of these kind of setups, in play, and we'll talk about what do you do when this happens and what do you do when that happens, and hopefully even give some drills for people to take away and if they want to implement them in their own little groups or whatever. So it's all about reps is the short answer. You've got to get those. If you're a player in the UK, you've got to get those at either an SBL or an NBL session, signing up to the Tasco Cup when that comes back after COVID, or playing in Europe. The Frank Menscher is a great tournament. Winterlax Cup, the Alice Abresti is fantastic. Those are all tournaments in the Czech Republic. There's tournaments in Lille that you can just get the train to if you're London-based. You've got to get out and play and be in these situations to make that second nature. And it will happen faster than you think as well, by the way. I think, a couple of years of attending 4 or 5, 6 events really made a massive difference to me. And I think we're now in a position where you could, if you wanted to play box lacrosse 12, 13, 14 or more times in a year in the UK, you probably can now. So that's a very long-winded way of saying just get more reps is the way to make that second nature, basically.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, when I share the video after this, I'll share the links to SBL, NBL, the Northern Box Lacrosse equivalent, so that anyone who's looking at the videos can see those links, get onto their social media and see where and when these sessions are going to be running once we get back out onto the field. Thank you. Any other questions for Tom? Because I have another one, but let anyone else jump in. I've got another one, Tom. So, scenario, we've got, I'm defending the player with the ball, and that player is around the half-board area.
Yeah.
Am I looking to push that player back up the floor or down the floor into the corner? Obviously, I don't want the player coming inside me, but am I pushing them up the field or down the field?
Yeah, it's a good question. I thought about doing some slides of the area that we're protecting, but I didn't want to go into too much detail today. So effectively, very like field lacrosse, you're protecting this cylinder pretty much straight up from the goal, edge of the creases, all the way up the middle of the floor. It's even more exaggerated in box than it is in field, or than it is in UK field, because right up to the halfway line, you don't want to let them over the top of you in box, because they're so much closer to the goal, and it will mess up the goalie's positioning and stuff. So we're protecting that cone out from the crease. If you're marking this player over here on the half boards, then it becomes a bit more tricky. This is actually a situation that happened to me quite a lot in the World Championships, because this player is really the anchor, but his check has come out to the half boards and there's nobody underneath. So if he was at the half boards and there was an anchor, you'd be forcing them down all day into that help from the anchor. But we have no anchor help here. So what you would actually make the decision to do is first and foremost try and stop them moving too much laterally either side. But I would probably make the decision to funnel up into my help without allowing myself to get beat over the top side. So you're relying very heavily on the top side defender off ball, talking to you and being prepared to jump over the top if this player starts to get the better of you at the half boards. So that's an important point, actually, is if you're in the anchor spot and you're being dodged on from any position, you're the lowest guy, you're not forcing them under, because all you would do in that situation is give them an alleyway to get in front of the goal and cause the goalkeeper some real problems. If you're in any other position and there is an anchor below you and you're up top, then yeah, you're forcing them down into the help from the anchor.
Thanks, Tom. That makes sense. So push them towards where the help is the way I
yeah. 9 times out of 10, we want to have an anchor at the bottom, so you will generally be funneling them low, kind of like the same as in field lacrosse, but it's just a slight exception is when you are the anchor and they've dragged you really high up, which happens occasionally, but not often.
Jules, you've got another question?
Yeah, one more.
Go for it.
When we transition on going into defense on a fast break, how you make a decision, because obviously in box we have, all attack subbing off and all defense coming on.
Yep.
And if you're going against a fast break, how you, as attacker or as an offensive player, how do you make a decision on, do I stay in or do I sub off for our defense? Obviously with the first play, I think it's quite easy because, if you see the guy running already at the goal and you're on the pitch and you can catch up, that's easy. But if you, let's say, that second attacker transitioning into defense, do you continue or would you recommend to sub off and get defense on?
It depends on the situation, but there's some real things that will that will be consistent across most cases. So first of all, look, this guy who's playing attack, if the ball transitions the other way, first of all, quite low, and we've obviously got a crease spot here and a sweet spot here that are the same boat as this half-board spot. Quite low, probably not going to stop any breaks. It's just a no-brainer for that person to hit the bench as fast as possible, and then that's immediately going to release a defender. What you see happen quite a bit is, one of the top 2 players will have to come back to cut off the initial break, but then maybe change their mind and, not change their mind, come back to cut off the initial break. They'll be with a defender, right, who's trying to get an attacking opportunity. And unless that defender's really good ball handler, which in a lot of cases in developing box lacrosse they won't be, they're eventually going to sub off. So you can just follow your check effectively, cut off the fast break and then get off. Some teams will play what's called a transition player. A transition player can play both ends of the floor. So that's a tactic which I don't want to go into too much detail because one of my teams used it to really good effect recently. But if you have a transition player, their responsibility is to cut off the fast break. So the other 4 guys know that transition player's got it covered 9 times out of 10, and they can get off. Likewise, when you're going the other way, the transitions player's job is to generate attack and try and get offensive players trapped in the defense. So you can name people who are always going to go back and defend. You can make sure you take advantage of the really obvious ones to get off the floor. This is also a really easy sub here. Just depends what this attacker does. Sorry, this defender transitioning does. But yeah, in most cases, in every case, you want to get at least 4 of the offensive guys off the floor eventually. You just got to use your judgment, and it can help to name a transition player to avoid that causing you problems.
How much emphasis you keep on having that transition player playing, the rather top of the defense to be able to make that transition faster? Or
you can't. It's totally so. You will quite often what you will see is like in the teams that I play in, I typically try and play in the anchor spot because I'm probably not as fast as some of my teammates, and I have a good brain to communicate and do the talking. So 9 times out of 10, I'll try and set up in a low position and talk to people. Likewise, we've got guys who are really, really fast who you want to have on those top spots and possibly in transition kind of positions. So thinking of the South team, or actually thinking of London Knights a few years ago, we had, he doesn't play anymore, so this is why I can name him, Jack Foster, who's really fast player. We'd always try and keep him on the top guy, but you end up getting moved around, and you have to be versatile enough to deal with both of those situations. So you can set up that way, and there will be opportunity to pass players back and forth and keep your position. But if the attacker good at setting picks, you'll get dragged out of position and find yourself in different spots. So it's a preference. It's not like in field lacrosse, where it's hard and fast positions like attack, midfield, defense. You've got to be versatile enough to do a little bit of each of those spots in the defensive end.
Awesome, thanks.
Dave, you've got a question.
First of all, thanks, Tom, for doing the presentation. You mentioned earlier about actually blocking shots as part of the role as a defender. Obviously, in field, it's mainly trying to not block the goalie's view. So what's the mentality and what's the goal? And when would you look to actually block shots as a defender rather than, or what's behind that?
Yeah, it's a big difference between field, and it's one of the things that differs the most. And if you watch tape of the England team playing in Vancouver, you'll see like the instinct of Brandon Smith and Sam Clare, who've grown up playing in Canada, to get in front of some of the shots. It's like it's the first thing that they do, and I think it comes from ice hockey and playing lots of box lacrosse. Basically, the English guys take a lot longer to get used to it because we look like wimps a lot of the time compared to those guys. What you're really trying to do, ideally, I'd have the best illustration of this is a man down versus man up. So if the shooter is up here, let's say, my goalkeeper is set like this, there's a couple of things that you can do. So one is this anchor position should be occupying some of the shooting lane. The goalie will be able to see past him. I've never had an issue with a goalie getting upset about kind of line of sight, but it is literally in the job description that when you're on ball side as an anchor in a man down, part of your job is to make it harder for the attacking guy to see the goal and put a good shot in on your keeper. Then the other time that you see it happen quite a bit is if the goalie So a great way to score goals in box lacrosse, and a way that happens all the time, is something happens over here which looks really good, but then you bang it to the other side, and as the goalie's moving, they put a shot in. The other way you see it happen quite a lot, again from the anchor players, is as the goalie's moving from this side to that side, say, this player could step in to cover the far post for the goalie, and again to make it harder. I think there was I'm pretty sure in one of the NLL finals, one of the couriers made a save, actually. In fact, Jeremy Thompson definitely did it a couple of years ago when he was playing for the Roche against someone in a big game. So that's just once your goalie's moving, if you're in the low position, you're expected to step in to where they've moved from effectively and make it harder. That's something the man down unit especially, you could almost do a whole presentation on that, to be honest. And but yeah, it's typically the anchor spots, and in most cases it's on the ball side. The anchor spot should be stepping in to make that shot harder for this player.
So it's more of an off ball looking to get in that shooting lane rather than the on ball looking to basically line up with the stick rather than the man. Yeah,
exactly. So your primary concern if you're on the ball carrier is all about where you're sending him, and anticipating and listening to your buddy about picks. You're not thinking about blocking the shots. It happens mainly in man down, or at least a lot more in man down than in man on man. And when it happens in man on man, it's typically out of a scramble and a kind of just not last ditch, but it's something that you can do to help out the goalie basically once they've got moving.
All right, thanks, Tom.
Sure.
We have about 4 minutes left of our hour. We've covered a lot of ground, but any more questions for Tom?
I actually wrote one down earlier in the chat side, is when you mentioned about the Y position, which would be the X position in field. If the player goes into that position behind goal, if he hasn't got the ball, are you marking him or are you staying in front of the goal to act as the anchor?
Yeah, it's such a pain to mark that. So I'll talk quickly. All right, so the question's about off-ball. So off-ball, if they go behind there, similar to field, I'm probably trying to hold, let's say the ball's on this side, I'm probably trying to hold position around here so that I can support, we talked about how important it is that the anchor supports someone who's getting picked on up here. Depending on how long they stay there, after a certain point, you've just got to say, okay, he's cleared through, I'm going to get out, and now someone else is the anchor. So you can do that if it's the strong side, obviously. If it's the weak side, hold your position a little bit longer, probably. Ultimately, you're responsible for not letting them zip the ball to that player for a dunk. So you've got to be in a position where you feel you can do a little bit of anchor and a little bit of stopping that shot. It's really, really hard to do. And on the ball is an easier question for me to answer. So if they've got the ball at Y here, we do have I think there is a general hard and fast rule if you're defending that, which is you want to force them out so that they're unable to dunk back on themselves. So in this case, if it was a right-hander at Y, I would be forcing them this way, so they almost have to turn and take like a typical field, question mark dodge shot, instead of forcing them this way, where they're able to backhand dunk it.
So you'd actually force them to the strong hand rather than the weak?
Yeah.
Right.
You're forcing them to turn back. You want them to turn back and shoot on themselves. So once they're over this way, and they start to face the goal again, it will be their weak side. But when they're facing the opposite direction, they're at Y, you are forcing them to almost to create like a shot where they turn around and shoot over themselves.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone. we're coming up to time. What we'll do there is we'll close it there. Tom, thank you very much for being the host today. Lots of good input. I'll save this recording and get it spread around social media. This hopefully won't be the only box lacrosse session that we run. There's lots more to talk about. Tom's already mentioned things like there's probably a whole hour about man down defence, but also share the links for SBL and NBL. And I'll just get one more chance for anyone to any closing statements. If not, we will wrap up.
Just an excellent session, Roche. Loved it, mate.
Good. Cheers. Glad you enjoyed it.
Okay, right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And hopefully we'll all be on the pitch or the floor again soon. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Have a good weekend.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.